Well, g'day everybody. It's Benjamin Morgan, Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia, and a slightly different setting this evening for this evening's broadcast. And as you can see, I'm most definitely in an aircraft hangar tonight. Unfortunately, my house is being renovated and I'm not in my usual studio desk to be able to bring tonight's broadcast, but still, it's a great place to be able to do this. Those of you interested, behind me there is the Beach E33C project that I've been working on now for a number of years, and it's on its way being restored here with the generous and expert help of Falcon Air, which is a maintenance company that I've got helping on that project. And I've been posting photos and updates of that, and I certainly do welcome you all to join me as I take that journey through getting that aeroplane back in the air. Now, tonight's broadcast is going to cover a wide array of topics. This is a bit of a catch-up, and I do apologise. I haven't been able to do the normal broadcast because I just haven't had access to the house for the last 3.5 weeks, but that actually will change next week when I move back in, and I'll be back into the normal programming. But joining me this evening will be AOPA Australia Director Clinton McKenzie, and we'll be working our way through a lineup of topics as almost a week or two in review. So I hope you all join us for this evening. If you want to post questions or comments live, please do so. We'll try and bring them up on screen throughout the broadcast, and we'll also try and respond to as many of them as we possibly can. Now, before we go too much further, I just would like to send a bit of a shout out to one of our members who unfortunately was involved in an aircraft accident on the 18th of March and has tragically lost their life battling in hospital. And to their family and to their friends, we really do extend our heartfelt condolences. It's a terrible situation for any family to have to navigate through, but our hearts are with them all. And at the same time, in saying that, I really do want to extend to all of us across the general aviation industry here in Australia, a call for vigilance on aviation safety. We love this industry, we love flying, we love our aircraft, we love everything to do with aviation, but it is a very serious business, and we really do need to take personal responsibility for safety and to make sure that we're trying to do everything that we can to improve safety outcomes across the industry. So please, if you're out there flying, and I hope you are, I hope you're out there getting out and about and using your airplanes, please, 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 be vigilant on everything. Take care in the pre-flights, make sure that your conduct is demonstrating great airmanship, and just be responsible, because after all, we want aviation to be accessible for many, many years to come. If we all share in this responsibility, we'll have a great outcome for everybody. So enough of that, and I might quickly now welcome in none other than Clinton McKenzie. Welcome back, Clinton.
Yeah, good evening, Ben. Good to be back, and it was a couple of weeks of quite busy activity on a range of fronts for AOPA and aviation safety related activities.
Well, we might as well dive straight into it. And I guess the first topic to hit up this evening would be a quick discussion on the issue of the independent flight instructor. Now, for many people across the aviation industry, they would have heard myself and a number of others within AOPA banging on about our top 3 reform agenda items. They are independent flight instructors, that is the ability for flight instructors to be able to go out and to work as an individual, provide their services, recreational, private and commercial flight training, and to open up Australia's flight training markets. And I think we've all seen over the years, as many people would agree, that aero clubs unfortunately have slowly retracted from flight training, and we've seen flying groups step away from flight training. And as that has happened, it's left this huge deficit, this huge void. And for many places right across Australia, you can't actually learn to fly in those locations anymore because there's just no schools. And so it was with great excitement that this past week CASA announced their new individual flight instructor. They're not calling it an independent, they're calling it an individual flight instructor Part 141 approval framework. This has been announced, and this is aiming to deliver to the general aviation community the ability for a flight instructor to apply for what CASA are calling, and you'll note that I'm saying what CASA are calling, a streamlined and cost-effective application for a Part 141 approval. And so there's been a mixed camp on this, Clinton, already. I've had a great deal of feedback from members saying, Ben, this is a fantastic outcome, and I would probably preface and say that I think that this is a great step in the right direction, and I think, you know, it's very important we do give credit where credit is due. CASA embarked on a process to deliver a independent flight instructor style regulatory response, and they did this without going through the normal, long, convoluted processes that would normally see something like this bogged down in 3, 4, 5 and 6 years of regulatory reform review. And they've delivered a framework. Now, obviously the proof is going to be in the pudding in this thing as it gets implemented, but effectively what they've given the industry as of this announcement is that a flight instructor can go out now, can apply to CASA and say, I'd like to become a 141 flight training school as an individual, that one flight instructor can be the CEO, they can be the head of flight operations, they can be the principal flying instructor, and they can be the janitor, the guy that changes the oil in the car and all the rest of it. They can control all those functions and they can satisfy CASA by adopting CASA's sample sample exposition and adopt CASA's sample syllabus for flight training. So an interesting response, probably not the response we had originally hoped for, but nonetheless, it seems to be a step in the right direction. Clinton.
Yeah, I agree. It's a step in the right direction, and what we'll need to look closely at is the few crash test dummies who go through the process, the streamlined process. If it is in fact streamlined and the outcome is practically the same as an instructor being able to instruct without having an AOC, or a process that's quite streamlined and sensible, then it'll be a good thing. But we'll wait and see how the initial crash test dummies go.
There are a couple of highlight points that I did pick up in my video that I did last week, and that was, first of all, I'm a bit surprised that CASA put a $1,560 application fee on this. I think CASA would be aware that we do have a very large flight training deficit in Australia, and we need to get flight training capability out into the industry. So I'm not sure that making people pay a thumping great big first off fee is appetising. And I guess the second thing with this is the sample exposition process, which I've had a good look at. It's not super quick. It does still require a person to go through and provide a fair body of information and support documentation there. So what I would hope comes from this, and it's certainly part of a communication that I've got for CASA that'll be going out this week, is to say, let's very quickly get some kind of review group together and start chiseling through some of these highlight points and see if we can't fine tune this as part of the initial rollout. And I think it will make it a little bit more palatable for those that need access to it.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness to CASA, they haven't got much choice but to charge a fee because they're subject to cost recovery principles. They're called regulatory services, even though nobody wants the services, they'll pay for them. The certification process is characterised as CASA providing a service of doing that assessment work, and the Commonwealth Department of Finance says thou shalt recover your costs for it. So I can't see too much out there, but anyway, as I said, we will see how the process runs.
Well, we've reached out to a number of flight instructors, and unfortunately, Maddie Johnson, who heads up the Flight Training Industry Association, is overseas at the World Flight Training Conference right now. Otherwise, we would have had her on this evening, but we're going to be putting together a panel of flight instructors and industry representatives. And the idea of this discussion, which we'll be hosting, is to kind of thrash out how the industry is responding to this reform. We've said it already, proof will be in the pudding. I've got about 25 instructors who've contacted me since the announcement to say, Ben, I will be making application under this. And to their credit as well, I've also had a number of aero clubs that have reached out and have thanked AOPA, saying, Ben, thank you for fighting to get this on the GA work plan over this last 2 years. And that should be noted by everybody across the industry. This independent flight instructor reform was not actually part of the CASA GA work plan, and AOPA led an effort to advocate to have it put on that GA work plan and to see to it that this would be a priority for industry delivery. And that work we're incredibly proud of. And I say it again, it may not be a perfect initial response for implementation, but we're certainly not going to be walking away from it. We'll continue to advocate until we get this right. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this is going to be a really good reform for the industry. Okay, our next topic, very quickly, just to, recap, is the much long-awaited, long overdue Part 67 pilot medical reform process. CASA have announced that they've kicked off the next round of Part 67 pilot medical reform technical working group analysis, for lack of a better word. And we are very pleased to be able to report to our members and to the industry that AOPA has now received a formal confirmation that we have been appointed to that technical working group. And we've been appointed alongside the Sport Aircraft Association. I think the Honourable Company of Air Pilots are on there, the RAOs are on there, and a number of other organisations. And the great news is that it is by far the vast majority of participants that are on this technical working group are in fact general aviation industry stakeholder representation groups or representative groups. And so we will be there through that process, ensuring that advocacy for a good outcome takes place. And we all know what a good outcome is. It's not hard. We've put out very clear policy documents on this over the last few years. And obviously it's now getting critical. We're down to the, I would assume we're probably down to the last 6 months of this before a decision can be publicly made, looking at the timeline. So strangely enough, when we were given this invitation, Clinton, the invitation had a confidentiality clause built into it. And this is one issue that I do want to touch, because we have received another friendly letter from the DAS of CASA, who was concerned that I was making public statements that these processes are run in secrecy and in silence. And I would remind that with respect to the technical working group, I want to talk to the whole industry about it. I would love all of our members and all of the industry stakeholders to provide feedback on what is being discussed. After all, when we sit on these technical working groups, we are just simply in terms of our members' representatives there. We're not our own representatives. They're there to advocate for our members. And I do find it odd that these technical working groups are to be considered confidential. I really do believe they should be public, and people should have an opportunity to see what their representative associations are arguing for or arguing against. I think that would be a very natural thing. Do you have a comment on that?
Well, after all, it's a lawmaking process. They don't make laws in Parliament in secret. Members of the public are entitled to do see what their elected members of Parliament do in terms of making laws. In some consultative processes, so when they go to public consultation on a proposed rulemaking, people can put in submissions and say in them that they would prefer that their submission they not be named or be treated confidentially. But that's different from the actual participants in the process, the people who are actually doing the work. All of this should be public, and the rules. I saw the rules of it, and it's always full of these modifiers that can be interpreted to mean anything or nothing. You know, we've got to maintain appropriate confidentiality. Well, what does that mean? If individual members of the technical working group would prefer that what they're advocating for be not made public, that that the ABC Association is advocating for X and they don't want the world to know that, well, that can be dealt with at the time. But if ultimately that's what prevails, the world is entitled to know that rule was made because ABC Association was pressing for it. These are rules that affect you and me and every other aviator, and it strikes me as a quite odd thing to do. How can you have a I wear a number of hats, and how can you have a representative of a representative body if that representative can't go back to that body and say, well, how things are heading. Here's what happened today. I just feel it's overkill.
Well, I also think from just one other very simple perspective, and that is members of an organisation, I think, would appreciate being able to see that their leadership are in fact arguing for the very things that they are joining and paying their membership dues to support. And likewise, I think it's also very critical for members who pay membership dues that they should be given an opportunity to see if their leadership are in fact not advocating for the things that they might be publicly saying they're advocating for, but behind the scenes they might be actually working against the system and trying to stop. And we've previously had situations where we've had certain groups publicly telling the industry, oh, yes, we're supportive, but behind the scenes actually campaigning against it. I really do think this is something that could be opened up. I'm interested in taking this to the technical working group and actually asking the working group, is this not something that we could support as representatives of our memberships and representatives of our industry, and open the doors on these processes and trust that the industry are mature enough to observe and to watch what's going on, and to, outside of those meetings, debate in appropriate forums whether those representations are happening in alignment with those organisations' missions and ideals, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, certainly if you went on the TWG and were actually advocating for everyone to have a Class 1 medical, I'd want someone to blow the whistle. Guess what Ben Morgan's doing? But here's the point. That's what I'm saying. If you're part of this, the actual rule-making process yourself, well, that rule-making process should be open to people who understand what's going on.
Terry Manderson, I think, is just in agreement there, saying at the very least to have the meetings published for every GA medical work party and ask for clarification. Look, absolutely. I think it's a common sense thing. I actually think I have a lot of trust and faith in the industry and the people in this industry. They're old enough and mature enough to digest this information. And it's the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, not the Military Aviation Safety Authority or the National Security Aviation Authority. It should be public information. We shouldn't have to fight to get access to see what people are pushing and lobbying for in these instances. And I think you're right, Clinton. This is about creating LAW. And if we're doing that, it should be an open, transparent process. All right, we've laboured that. Now, this is one that's actually really has been an issue that since you've joined AOPA as a director, you've actually been doing a bit of campaigning on the board on this issue, and that is to give an update tonight on the colour vision deficient pilots situation in Australia. And you've been not only talking with colour vision deficient pilots who've been approaching you now that you're with AOPA, but you've been reaching out to the previous, I think there was an organisation set up quite a number of years ago, the CVDPLA. So I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, the Colour Vision Deficient Pilot Association, set up and run by a true legend of Australian aviation, and that's Dr. Arthur Pape, someone who left very huge shoes on the AOPA executive many years ago, and he was the spearhead of the fight for colour vision deficient pilots in Australia to overcome the prejudice, and it's just biased prejudice against colour vision deficient pilots in civil aviation these days. Fortunately, I got to speak with him for a while the other day. He's pretty busy these days. He's still practicing medicine, doing all sorts of things. And he, a lot of the battle's been taken up by a guy named John O'Brien, commercial pilot. Again, a big fight in the AAT. And Arthur is very keen for AOPA to take up a lot of the heavy lifting for colour vision deficient pilots, because I didn't want to step on his toes, because he's literally the man and it was his association. But he said, I'm very busy these days and I'm getting tired of this, and he's got to hand over to someone. And he's also very keen to do a broadcast, one of these broadcasts, because we've had another return to the dark ages. There was a dawning of enlightenment, of objectivity, with the introduction of through in New Zealand an operational colour vision competence test, because they worked out, the NZCAA were enlightened enough to know that this is an operational competence question. We know these people are colour vision deficient. It's easy to find them. There's tests for them. And what happened was they were enlightened. They introduced this test, which is an operational test, which was then adopted by CASA, and then I call them the zealots, reigned again and have come up with their own particular view of the world, and they want to introduce their own thing, which is again to try and trap the unclean, because they can't understand that the difference between being able to identify colours, red, green, blue, and there's 3 levels of tests in the regulations, and the important thing, which is the 3rd level test, which is identifying the meaning of something that just happens to be coloured. And as you and I know, and as we know in modern civil cockpits, if there's a light on the instrument panel that says engine fire, it doesn't matter whether that enunciator's red, mission brown, duck egg blue, or Barry white. All you've got to do is be able to identify what that means. And there's still issues about, they want to go back to the dark ages with PAPI tests and all of these sorts of things. So anyway, there's a new fight to be fought, and Dr. Pape is happy for us to help fight that fight, and I'm very happy to help him fight that fight, because it's dark ages stuff.
Well, Clinton, it is a really, it's often one of those issues that it's easy for it to be forgotten by the broader aviation community, because it's kind of like one of those 2% issues where not a large number within the aviation community will be affected by this. So very easy for people who are not affected by it, not even be in their kind of concern sphere. But CASA did actually move to adopt a sensible approach to managing CVD. And then without any real notice to industry and without any consultation with industry, they just stopped. And they, again, proving that they can kind of take a few steps forward and then suddenly reel themselves 1,000 steps backwards. So it must be very frustrating for those that are impacted in this sphere to have been given that false hope that there was a pathway and that there was a commitment to drive it. And then for the regulator just to pull that out from underneath them was just very, very disappointing.
It's just done with absolutely zero sensitivity to the human costs of it. Not just the dollar cost, but the human costs of people who are planning their careers and wanting to do something, and it just gets changed. And I saw this, we had that discussion about the Form 420 about ADHD and ASD and all this sort of stuff, and just the carefree arrogance with which this stuff is implemented and changed and switched off with no explanation to the victims. And I call them victims of these thought bubbles by AVMED. And it's just, that's what I don't see. Most good doctors have got some humanity and good bedside manner, and they understand the human aspects of this. But it's like AVMED, these zealots, they treat colour vision division pilots like trash. They're hunted down and culled from the commercial pilot population, and that's just inhumane. I see it as inhumane.
Well, it's discriminate. That's what it is. And in any other industry, what you would end up with is you'd end up with a massive lawsuit, because people would be saying, I'm able-bodied, I'm actually an abled person, but I'm being treated like I'm a disabled person and prohibited from pursuing careers where they are totally capable of functioning as any other pilot does. It's sad. And we see this in so many other areas of AVMED with aviation medicine, and they hide behind, we are AVMED, we are all about safety. And the realities are, nine times out of 10, they are on some esoteric argument. And we see the pilots participating in the industry or transferring out of the industry and living long, fruitful lives, doing other complex, high-stress things, but just not being allowed to fly that Cessna 150, it's just very dangerous.
Well, that's why I've told you there's provisions in the Civil Aviation Act positively authorising CASA to make discriminatory laws, because they've fooled the Parliament with the mystique of aviation. This is once there's that inch of space between the rubber tire and the ground, that's a completely different world, unless there are numbers on the tail of the aircraft. But anyway, we'll hit AVMED again at regular intervals, because this is the behaviour.
Okay, well, that's probably a really good segue moment just to get everyone looking at what this link is just on screen. So, even just the discussions we've had so far this evening, AOPA is out there fighting to try and turn the tide on these issues. And I've said it so many times before, if we're going to be successful in fixing up the aviation industry, and by the way, we will be successful, we will eventually get these problems sorted. We have to have strong relationships with key politicians. We have to have strong relationships with our oversight politicians. We have to have strong relationships, in fact, with CASA. And we need to have strong relationships across industry, but we can't do any of that unless we are given the horsepower and the funding that we need as an association to represent people across this great country. So you know what? You can actually make a difference here as an individual out there. Quite often I hear people saying, "Oh, Ben, what could I possibly do? How can I change the system?" The way we change the system is we work together. We come together as a national aviation community. So jump online, www.aopa.com.au/membership. It's $159 as a full fare-paying member of AOPA to support this organisation so that we can continue this great work on behalf of all of you. So there it is on screen, www.aopa.com.au/membership, or you can contact Lorraine directly on the mobile phone number that's listed. Okay, and just speaking of Lorraine, I should actually just give a very quick shout out, Clinton, to her. So AOPA Australia Director Lorraine McGilvray and also John Maitland. And I might just quickly put it up on screen. There's a photograph I took last night. I actually drove into Sydney City last night and caught up with the Rat Pack. So on the left there, you've got myself on the left of frame, and then you've got John Maitland, who's been a director on the board now for some time. He's a well-known aviation lawyer, and he's been involved in general aviation for many, many years. Up further, third from the left there is Andrew Anderson from Anderson Aviation. It was great to catch up with Andrew. To the right of Andrew is John Rabans. He's an aviation barrister. And has represented many aviation businesses and persons and many of our members across the industry. To his left, you've got Lorraine McGilvray, and to her left, you've got Bob McGilvray. And Lorraine, of course, is on the board of AOPA. So a great opportunity last night to catch up with them all and to discuss a host of aviation industry current events and also aviation industry legal matters, which are either on their way through the courts right now or are about to commence proceedings in the courts. And so, again, I really do thank all of them for having some time for me last night to catch up and to learn more about it. All right, next up on the list, Clinton, for this evening, if I just bring my iPad back up, which has neatly gone to sleep on me. Don't you hate that? I don't have my usual screen set up, so I'm making it work. Okay, Mudgee Airport. We're on to the Mudgee Airport update. So I might let you take this one from the top and I'll throw some comments in there on the side.
Okay, I thought we were going to go to the ATSB, but we'll go Mudgee first. Yes, a very fruitful visit to Maji Aerodrome. I think it was very useful because we identified the rub points and the cause of many of the rub points up there, which are hopefully, well, they're solvable. They're easily solvable. The question will be whether there's the will and the wit and will to get back to facilitating the tailwheel operations up there. For those who aren't aware, there was a change up there, and suddenly the aircraft that were training and using the grass part of the runway strip for 0422 were told, no, you're not allowed to use the grass anymore, even though there are numerous operational reasons and safety reasons for that to be an available option. I think there was confusion came out of CASA, because I think one part of CASA was telling people one thing, and then we wrote to the CEO of CASA, and the CEO of CASA came back with what I think was with which a view with which I agree, and that the confusion around Part 139 MOS and all these provisions and everything was just that, confusion. So I understand that it was good that the council facilitated the meeting there, because they listened to what we had to say. It was a happy coincidence that on flying in, I got confused by something in the en route supplement, and lo and behold, We then realised why that had been put in the en route supplement, because the person who put it in there didn't understand what the language put in the ERS actually meant. And so we and the local aviators at Mudgee are busily trying to educate and help the council to understand what they're doing to not inadvertently create. It's one of these crazy situations where all of these things being done in the name of safety, genuinely in the name of safety, are producing less safe outcomes as a consequence of not understanding what they're dealing with. And in the case of the tailwheel aircraft, not understanding that we're talking about aircraft that weigh less than and are less complicated than your average family car, and could land and take off on the local cricket pitch, cricket ground, and not leave a mark. And we're doing as much as we can to educate the council to restore Mudgee to its former glory, because it's a beautiful place. The whole area is great. It's worth visiting. It was fantastic staying in the hangar house up there. Thank you to Gary and Kay up there. It was just wonderful. Charles, Tim, and the other local aviators. It's just a wonderful place with lots of wineries and other attractions up there. So that's what we're to do is just help get it back to where it was.
Well, look, Clinton, it was really, I mean, you and I, we obviously had an opportunity to go up early. We got to meet a few people and see the lay of the land, and then attend the meeting. And it was really, really clear that it's really an education exercise. It's just all too often a case in Australia where under this new Part 139 regulation, that we have an airport manager appointed to manage an airport, and then the next thing we find is the airport manager, who's come from another industry or something completely unrelated to aviation, is struggling to get a grasp on what is considered legal or illegal operations, to use it in a simplistic term as I can, and then they start applying their own interpretations. They go to CASA, GDC give them an answer, and then the answer is not typically replicated when they go back a second time, and then they're stuck on their side of the equation trying to come up with, well, what is the answer? So I'm going to apply what I think and interpret might be the best course of action. And of course, in many of the cases, these outcomes are really not supportive of aviation. They damage aviation. And as Michelle, who was from the economic side of council, and she did a wonderful job at the meeting, I think, and all credit to her for coming out and spending time at that meeting to listen to aviators, local aviators and local aviation businesses, and also tolerate us coming in from abroad. But they got the message. I actually think the council got it in the end. They understood that there's a real educational issue here, that the airport manager really needs to have a solid understanding, but more importantly, council needs to be supported by organisations like AOPA and other representative groups that can actually help cut through all the confusion and deliver an outcome that keeps aviation vibrant, growing, and sustainable at the airports. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a council meeting there tomorrow night. The locals are attending and making a few presentations to the council, and we'll see where it goes. Because, as I said to Michelle in an email to Michelle, I said, look, you just don't want to devolve to the point at which it's the locals, your captive audience, who move there on the basis of it being a wonderful aviation-friendly council, are now at war with you. So your own ratepayers are your captive audience, and they're the ones that are on the brunt of all this, become your arch enemies, and that's an outcome to be avoided, when actually that all they want to do is help you to run a very safe, wonderful facility there, which will bring, and I've said to talk to Michelle about fees as well. Alienating people and making them fly somewhere else is going to lose the council local businesses more in business, than the council will ever collect in fees. So anyway,
typically the councils, in my experience doing this for the last 7.5 years, the council will go to someone like your AVData. They'll appoint an AVData to collect the fees. AVData will say, we now need to take our slice of the pie. And you could end up in a situation like Wagga Airport found itself in, which is that AVData were taking the entire amount collected, and council were actually in the end charging visiting and local aviators simply for the benefit of handing that money to AVData, and the council wasn't receiving a cent. And when we met with Wagga Council and were able to show them, the economic argument here is actually quite a powerful one. There's no point creating an impost simply to feed a Canberra-based, fees and charges company. So I would assume the same's going to happen at Mudgee if we allow that to happen. Good thing, Clinton, we're involved in the fight there, and that we're working so closely with local aviators. And a huge thank you to all of the local members up in Mudgee who have supported us. And I think also, if I'm not correct, there was a vote by the Maji Aero Club. Do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, well, we got an email saying they voted to join AOPA as a club, which is good. And I think I'd reinforce what you said before. I mean, I'm a bit blunter than you. You say, you Ben, say, like what you see, support AOPA needs your support. I say to people, when you need our help, not if you need our help, when you need help, you better be an AOPA member, because that's the first thing I ask when I get an email from someone. Oh, what about this? They go, well, yeah, AOPA member. I'm doing this for free, but the weight of numbers, we still need the funding, and we still need the weight of numbers, which helps us do what we do.
Mate, we're no different to the broader industry. We have our own challenges, and we've always had our challenges. And the truth of the situation is we've always been so underfunded, and we've had such a genuine lack of resources that the only reason, I'm happy to make a few disclosures tonight, all right? One of the only reasons that AOPA has actually survived over the last 5 years is that you have a board of directors who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to keep the organisation financial, donating huge amounts of time and in many cases business assistance. Mark de Stoop, former president, current vice president, donates all of our facilities here at Bankstown Airport at zero cost to our members and association, and that helped save the association as we were heading into COVID and facing some very difficult times. You've got Paul Rushton, who's providing accounting and CPA services to AOPA, and that is helping relieve AOPA of thousands of dollars worth of costs that otherwise get dragged out of the association. You've got John Maitland, who's provided an enormous amount of legal support and services to assist the association, and the story goes on. And I can even say from my own perspective, even though I'm paid as the chief executive to support the association, I have given back tens of thousands of dollars in AOPA expenses, travel expenses, accommodations, you name it, that I've pitched in with, because I believe in the mission. The mission is actually all about us. It's about our industry. It's about our survival as general aviation. We want this to work. We want it to survive, but we really do need people to pile in, jump online, become a member, and join the Maji Aero Club. And I got an email today actually from the, which aero club was it? The Mackay Aero Club. The Mackay Aero Club have emailed me today saying, Ben, we want to join, we want to support, we love what AOPA is doing for GA. So there is actually support there. We just need people to activate that and to get involved. So really, really important stuff. Just on the Mudgee Airport side, we will be communicating with the Civil Aviation Safety Authority on Mudgee. And I know that these videos do get reviewed by CASA and they get reviewed by the Department of Infrastructure. And I just want to highlight one point. One of my concerns in this, and you touched on this, Clinton, is that there is no doubt a situation where representatives inside of CASA who have been contacted by the council may very well have simply overreached in their response to council. This could actually be just a very simple thing to fix. And I believe that Pip Spencer's communication to us as an association when we raised these questions was pretty clear and unambiguous in many respects. Now, we've provided, for clarity for our members, we've provided that correspondence to the council at Mudgee, and no doubt I will assume, but I wouldn't doubt for a minute that they probably have already contacted CASA to say, we've got this letter from the DAS, it's pretty unambiguous, so on and so forth. I would encourage CASA, let's get this fixed. Like, this is an opportunity to protect aviation at Mudgee and to encourage general aviation at Mudgee. Let's not overreach and overcomplicate the issue. I think the DAS was on the point. There's nothing prohibiting any of this from happening. Let's just get Mudgee back up and running, and then let's work out the finer details beyond that. So that's just obviously just...
Yeah, I agree with you, because the guidance centre concept is very good, and I was surprised about it, and I've asked them lots of questions about pretty simple stuff, but of course in aviation the answer is never that simple. But bear in mind, in some of those, and I've got comprehensive answers, but in a couple of occasions, I've looked at these things and gone, and I've gone back with supplementary questions, and on one occasion the answer to the supplementary question was, we for question one we said no, but we meant yes. Okay, so they're two different answers. One's yes, one's no. And their second answer was the correct one, in my view. The other thing that in the course of one of these question and answer trails was, they said, we now realise that we got an amendment to an exemption wrong, and now we're going to have to amend the amendment to the exemption. Now, credit to them for actually acknowledging that. I mean, often bureaucracies will dig their heels in and go, we gave them the wrong answer, but we're never going to admit it. So kudos to them actually admitting that they'd made a mistake or they're doing something. But the short point is, just because CASA says something, don't make it so. If we get an answer from them, that's their opinion, and often it's worth probing and going back and saying, but have you thought about? And as you scratch the surface, things change, and I think that's what's really happened at Mudgee. A little bit of information like, if this part of the runway strip's buggered, are people allowed to land on it? Well, I know the answer to that. Don't land on a buggered piece of runway strip. Which is not the same as saying no one is ever allowed to land on the grass part or the unsealed part of a runway strip. So I think good on CASA for running that process, but the questions and answers need to be carefully crafted and carefully analysed to make sure that it's an actual answer to the scenario that you're dealing with.
Okay, well, that's Mudgee Airport. We're going to continue advocating there. Obviously, we're not completely done. We do need to see that rollback on that prohibition on grass surface operations, and hopefully we do get a great result. And just again, a huge thank you to all of our members who are up there, local aviators that called out and supported us going up to the meeting, and of course to Gary and his lovely wife. They were fantastic in putting us up, and I think Charles even took us out for dinner and paid for dinner that night. What a great bunch of guys up there. All right, Clinton, another issue here which we want to tackle tonight, and I did actually get them in reverse. We were supposed to tackle the ATSB issue, and we've got I guess the talking point tonight is the ATSB and their refusal to investigate, and there's some points that you want to raise in relation to that.
Yeah, I mean, the most recent controversy, or was not the only one, was the Midair Collision resulting in 2 fatalities up at Gympie in November last year. And my attention was drawn to a supplementary estimates hearing, that's a big word for Senate hearing, where it's probing public officials on what they're doing. And this one was on the 13th of Feb, and the ATSB and the Chief Commissioner were in front of that committee, and questions were asked about why the ATSB was not investigating that and other fatalities. And I watched the video, and I watched it twice, and I watched it 3 times, and I'm sure that I heard The Chief Commissioner, Angus Mitchell, say, quote, "It has been a long-established position that we do not investigate in that recreational space, and that's been since 2014, since the Forsyth review." Now, when I listen to those words and read them, he seems to be first saying clearly this has been the long-standing practice since 2014, so for 9 years, or 8 years, say, and that there's something in the Forsyth review which supports that approach. And we've since, and previously there's been, they pointed to the statement of expectations, and I'll talk about the statement of expectations too, because it's actually not a statement of expectations, but we'll get to that. Now, I'll try not to, hopefully I won't blow up my computer as I go to these other documents, but I went to the Aviation Safety Regulatory Review list of recommendations, and it says, so this is the Forsyth review. The Aviation Safety Regulatory Review panel recommends that, 1, 2, 3, the ATSB investigates as many fatal accidents in the sport and recreational aviation sector as its resources will allow. Now, I can't find anything in there to support or urge the ATSB not to investigate fatalities in sport and recreational aviation. In fact, I read it as quite the opposite, and we'll talk about resources and an FOI request that I put in yesterday because I'm so confused about all of this, because it seems that when I watch these parliamentary committee hearings and anything with CASA, ATSB or Air Services, it's like you've gone down a rabbit hole into Alice in Wonderland, and I sit there thinking, this doesn't make sense to me. So the practice since 2014. Well, I've previously called everyone's attention to an ATSB investigation that's on the ATSB's website, coincidentally, at the Gympie ALA, and this was 27th of August 2016, which is after 2014, and it's an investigation into a near collision due to runway incursion between an RV7 and a DG400 motor glider, which in my books are sport or recreational aircraft. So it was a near miss. Anyone hurt? Zero. Any piece of aviation machinery scratched? Zero. So it's just this, the juxtaposition messes with my head. They're doing an investigation of an EMS, which is a good thing because students of safety systems and all of that, and in accident prevention, know that near misses, you learn a lot from near misses. So that's an investigation in the recreational aviation space after 2014. So I don't understand how the Forsyth review is being cited as some sort of authority for this, and it seems that the Chief Commissioner is not aware of what his organisation has actually been doing in the recreational and sport aviation space. I hate those descriptions. I'm going to say light aircraft because they're just light aircraft, and we'll get to the actual important safety issue out of this. But I just want to touch on the statement of expectations, the Minister's statement of expectations, which has been cited before. Okay, what this statement is actually a notice under Section 12E, 12 capital AE of the Transport Safety Investigation Act that says the Minister may, by written instrument, notify the ATSB of the Minister's views on the appropriate strategic direction for the ATSB. It's just about the Minister's views on the appropriate strategic direction. That's what the Minister has power to do. And that section goes on to say, subject to Section 12AB, the ATSB must have regard to a notification given under subsection 1. Now, that having regard to is a very important set of words in law. It just means that the ATSB must have regard to them, but it's not a direction for them to slavishly follow. And that's why it says subject to section 12AB. And that's section 12AB is the one that says the Chief Commissioner is not subject to a direction from anyone in relation to the exercise of his or her powers. However, when exercising his or her powers, the Chief Commissioner must act consistently with the ATSB in the performance of his functions or the exercise of its powers. And the one before that says, subject to section 21, the ATSB is not subject to direction from anyone in relation to the performance of its functions or the exercise of its powers. Now, why am I going through this? Well, because previously that statement of expectations has been cited as some sort of holy writ from which the ATSB cannot depart. And interestingly, when you read it, it says, this is the statement of expectations. So it's not a statement of expectations. What it is actually a notification of the minister's views as to the strategic direction of the ATSB. But the document itself says, this represents a notice of strategic direction to the ATSB under section 12A of the Transport Safety Investigation Act. So on its face, these documents are they're masterpieces in ambiguity, because you could read that as saying, well, that's a direction to the ATSB about its strategic direction. Well, it's not. It's just, these are my views. And there's only one power of direction, interestingly, of the minister in the ATSB Act, TSI Act, and the minister can direct the ATSB to conduct an investigation. It would be open to the minister tomorrow to direct ATSB to do an investigation into that Midair Collision up in Gympie in November 22. Now, if I had to bet folding money, if that proposition was put to the minister would say, no, the ATSB is completely independent and I don't tell it what to do. Notwithstanding, that's the one power that the Parliament put in there in the TSI Act to give the minister the power to do that very thing. And I'll get to the minister's statement of expectations about money in a sec, because again, there's this argument about resources. But I just want to, I'll touch on the safety issue. What worries me is the Chief Commissioner of the ATSB may be labouring under the misconception that sport and recreational aircraft goes on over there, where they're busily doing dangerous things and will only ever hurt themselves. And there's regular public transport involving fare-paying passengers over there, and ne'er the twain shall meet. Now, the technical term for that is that's bullshit. Okay? Every day, regular public transport aircraft full of fare-paying passengers mix the skies, uncontrolled airspace, with the kinds of aircraft involved in that mid-air collision. And if you speak to the crews of those aircraft going into uncontrolled airspace, uncontrolled aerodromes in Class G, what do they identify as their biggest risk? The light aircraft with whom they're sharing the airspace. And so knowing why two aircraft collided in G, whether they're sports, aviation, especially, let me change it, especially if they're sports or recreational aircraft, is important to the safety of passengers in regular public transport aircraft. Now, it may be, one of the people involved in that mid-air collision was a glider pilot. Glider pilots are among the most experienced pilots out there. You look at who competes in the national championships in gliding. They're bloody people with thousands of hours of expertise in fighter pilots, jumbo jet pilots. And these people. So knowing why, what happened there is important. And for everyone who thinks, Well, it's a big jet. So when they're flying around near Ballina or Mildura or wherever they are, big jets are easy to see. Now, I can tell you from first-hand experience, first thing, the big jets are flying 3 times faster than the aircraft for which, other people are used to looking for light aircraft. And secondly, when those jets go into ground clutter at low level, they are hard to see. Now, I trained at Canberra Airport. My corrected vision is perfect. I'd have Instructor sitting beside me, and we'd be told about an RPT jet in a place, where you'd look, on long final to runway 35, and you'd look, and I'd say, mate, I can't see this thing, and it's in the ground clutter. So that's what the short message that I'd like to get across to the Chief Commissioner of the ATSB is that accidents involving light aircraft can have implications for public transport safety, because the skies are being shared with all of those aircraft, and that needs to be understood. I'll just touch on money, because of course these things are always a matter of principle, and of course the ATSB doesn't have unlimited resources, but it does say, the statement of expectations says, I expect the ATSB will provide timely advice to government when the costs of necessary investigation activities are likely to exceed established ATSB budget levels, so the consideration can be given to the need for budget supplementation. Now, of course, the exquisitely ambiguous word in there is the word necessary. Will provide timely advice to government when the cost of necessary investigation activities are likely to exceed ATSB budget levels. So if someone says, well, we decided it's not necessary to investigate sport and recreational accidents, then they're not necessary, so it's got nothing to do. We don't need to notify the Minister of that. But I'm just reflecting on the fact in the last year, more than 10 passengers and crew died in commercial helicopter accidents in 1 year. Forget sport and recreational aviation, in 1 year. Now, if I were the ATSB Chief Commissioner, the Chief Commissioner of the ATSB in that sort of situation, I would be saying, I need some heavyweight rotary wing operational experts. I need them now because this looks problematic. And we need to work out very quickly whether this is a systemic issue or whether now. So as a consequence of this, I've put in an FOI request asking for documentation in the last 6 years or so of advice given to the Minister or with the department with portfolio responsibility, advising the Minister that the ATSB needs more money to do more investigations. And it will be interesting to see what comes back from that, because it would be unfortunate. You see, the ATSB, like other government agencies, are subject to this thing called the efficiency dividend. It's imposed by the Department of Finance, and it's completely hated by the entirety of the Commonwealth bureaucracy other than the Department of Finance. It says currently Commonwealth entities are subject to an annual efficiency dividend that reduces entity budgets each year in anticipation of efficiencies being found, blah, 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 blah. So this is a part of all of the process that results in huge amounts of things going out to consultants and various other things. But wouldn't it be unfortunate if the ATSB is being funded less and less each year, and no fiercely independent Chief Commissioner is, in accordance with the statement of expectations, never going to the Minister and saying, this is serious and we need more money to deal with this stuff, because that's not being fiercely independent. So, as I say, when the FOI response comes back, I will happily brief everyone as to what that says. This is public money. It's public officials asking the government for more money, and there should be no reason why those requests, if they've been made and the response to them are made public, should be no problem at all.
Well, Clinton, I know throughout my time with AOPA, I've been here long enough that I've been through the Greg Hood Chief Commissionership, now into our Angus Chief Commissionership for the ATSB, and I previously had met with Greg Hood on these issues multiple times, and during those discussions raised this question: why are recreational sport accidents not being investigated? They are important. The lives lost matter. The passengers lost matter. And we as pilots and aircraft owners have a great deal to learn from these accidents. And in fact, the very fundamental that gave birth to the ATSB is that when we investigate our accidents impartially and we seek to understand root cause and we seek to understand influences via safety system influences or governance and regulatory influences, we can improve. I find it, and I know I'm going to caveat this now because the hate mail is going to start, right? I'm going to caveat this right now. I'm just speaking facts, people. I'm not trying to insult anybody. But we have this bizarre situation where for many, many, many years now, the ATSB turned away from sport and recreational aviation and handed the keys of investigation to the very people who are proclaiming to be self-managing recreational aviation. Now, what that has given rise to is it's given rise to a whole generation of accident investigations where the people investigating it have absolutely no interest whatsoever in highlighting any problems or any concerns or any involvements they may have had system-wise in influencing safety outcomes in that space. And I think that that's really bizarre. I was shocked last night sitting with an aviation barrister and an aviation lawyer and an aircraft manufacturer in that space to learn that the aircraft manufacturers are not even being provided the accident reports so that they are told what is happening to their own aircraft. The information has been withheld. And I learned last night that in many cases, the investigations that have been conducted in the recreational sector are now considered commercial in confidence. Now, I'm blown away by this, mate. I cannot believe that CASA and the ATSB are able to sit back and quietly nod their heads and say this was a great outcome. How have we evolved as aviation to allow a private company to seal its investigations as commercial in confidence, and as pilots and aircraft owners, we will never know what caused an accident to friends, colleagues, or if I happen to own one of those aeroplanes, am I putting myself at risk? Am I putting my passengers at risk? I'm not being given that information. I find that almost incomprehensible in 2023 that would be a fact. I was also quite shocked last night to learn that there is now a growing list of accidents in the recreational sector where the self-administration are settling out of court and sealing and making confidential their settlements, the accident, and any details about it. In other words, instead of a system where we have an ATSB going in and doing an impartial, independent investigation and delivering to industry the like it or not root cause analysis, we've got a system where the self-administration is now able to seal it all up, settle something out of court to shut the parties up. Everyone walks away. It's all good. Don't look here. Nothing over here to see. Look over there. Oh, look at that Cessna 150 flying with VH on it. Isn't that rare? Don't look over here. It's all good. This is not about this is shocking.
You used the word evolution. I call it devolution. We're going devolving back. We're going backwards. And that tragedy up at Gympie involved two factory manufactured aircraft. One of them was VH registered. Now, what if one of them, the canopy flew open due to a defect and the pilot couldn't see where he was going, or the wings fell off, which is one thing. Or what happens if, what if it was incorrect use of radio, or what was said on the radio? Was it people were confused? Did someone give a wrong position report? Because if the ATSB is going to stick with its principles, what it should do is, when there's a collision between a RPT jet and a light aircraft, a recreational aircraft at, say, Ballina, it should just say this is a rare operational event, and the roulette wheel just came up 00, and there's nothing to learn from it.
Well, because Clinton, the one that has troubled me greatly is that accident that happened up north in Queensland, where the aircraft had not been maintained for years. The pilot didn't have a current medical or license. He was flying with, I believe it might have been his father-in-law or a family relative. They've obviously had an engine failure. It's crashed, broken up, and one of them's been killed, right? Now, the ATSB put out a statement and said it was a sport aircraft accident. There was nothing that could logically be learned from the accident, and they weren't going to investigate. Now, that was to me one of the greatest disappointments, not because they weren't investigating, but because that accident actually had a great deal to educate the industry about, and also it had a great deal to identify about the culture of aviation that CASA have grown. Now, here is a guy who'd been operating for years, flying in and out of popular locations where there was real visibility, yet he managed to exist within the aviation ecosystem and no one had a clue. The regulator had no idea this guy was flying around, not maintaining his aeroplane, taking passengers, etc., etc. If there had been an investigation, I would assume the investigation would have looked at, how is it that this pilot had never been checked on? How is it that this guy existed within the system that CASA have created, and therefore is there not a role of responsibility from the regulator? And it's exactly the same fundamentals in so many of these recreational accidents that has yet to be examined, that we as an industry have lost the opportunity and the value to make broad and genuine improvements and corrections in aviation. So I think it's actually really disappointing that the ATSB have taken the positions that they do. I remember Greg Hood sitting in front of me in Canberra saying, Ben, we just don't have the financial resources to investigate every accident, therefore we have to draw a line in the sand, and we can only investigate what we have resources to investigate. Now, that sounds awfully logical, but I remember saying and asking Greg Hood at the time, what measures and what steps are you taking to educate the government that you need the financial resources? And all I got told is, Ben, we have processes for this, but nothing's improved. There's been no improvement.
I'll be interested to see out of my FOI request how often Greg Hood, in accordance with the Minister's Statement of Expectations, informed the government that I'm going to need another couple of $1 million because of this spate of accidents. And on the subject of CASA, the ATSB and ATSB came out with its report into that tragedy of the mid-air breakup of that helicopter involving a pilot who apparently was not qualified and killed a 12-year-old girl passenger who was along, and it was an awful set of circumstances. And in response to that, a statement was made, and this is attributed to CASA. This is a statement attributed to CASA. We encourage people to always check pilots are appropriately licensed and qualified to fly. Now, how would a member of the public have any clue as to what to ask for and then know that what they're looking at establishes that the person that they're looking at is licensed and qualified to do what they're about to do? And that is one of the most monumentally ignorant statements that I've heard come out of CASA. And that's out of a strong field of crap that comes out of CASA to say that. Because you ring up CASA and ask them whether Clinton McKenzie's qualified, licensed and qualified. And they'll say it's private. It's privacy says. How's the member of the public, if the member of the public goes up to a cowboy pilot and says, are you licensed and qualified to fly? I reckon the cowboy pilot's going, yeah, just ask me. Well, how do I know that's true? Well, if I was a cowboy and wasn't licensed and qualified, the regulator would be all over me like a ton of bricks.
Well, Clinton,
in jail.
We just had a comment come up on screen now. I'll just put it back up. It says that was at Ball Bay. I can tell you that situation was a direct result of over-regulation. Look, obviously everyone's going to have their own unique take on this, but, when I first saw that accident hit the news and all of a sudden it started coming out that this aircraft hadn't been maintained and the pilot didn't have a current medical, all these things come flashing to my mind. How difficult AVMED have made the system. There must be quite a number of pilots out there flying now with no medical because they've just given up on the system. I know from nearly 14 years of experience in selling aircraft in this country. I did 14 years of experience before I joined AOPA selling aeroplanes and being involved in aviation. And I spoke to thousands of people across the industry and I heard all the stories of what's going on out west and up north, across the country. There is this is the missed. I feel we've failed ourselves. We've failed ourselves because really we should have been hammering so hard on this ATSB issue 7 years ago when I started, because that is where we make improvements. We make improvements when we forensically take a look at these accidents and we say, let's just put away the influences of all these individuals in the picture and forensically look at root cause and just let the evidence take us to where it concludes. I think we've just missed out on nearly 2 decades of industry improvement because we've allowed these accidents to be investigated by the very people who are incentivized not to really be too open about what goes on with these accidents. And
you look at the medical issue. Another one of the rabbits down in Wonderland was twice watching Pip Spence say in response to the question whether there was a perverse incentive for pilots not to report any medical issue, and Pip Spence saying no, looking straight at them and saying no perverse incentive, stopping people from throwing themselves under the bus to AVMED. And if that, I don't think it's delusion. I just think it's the convenient answer. Everything's fine. There is no problem. That's the convenient answer. Well, if we're just going to go to the convenient answer every time and just tell the politicians that everything's fine and they're going to accept it, then we just got to keep getting louder and louder and fighting these things because someone has to.
It's difficult, though, at times to see how we will achieve sensible reform and sensible change with some of these things, Clinton. And I, just as we're this is one of the things I never thought I would have the virtue of being able to go back to, is to go, I've been doing this long enough now that I can start to call back on some of these things. But during my AOPA journey, one particular issue came up, which was I started being contacted by aircraft owners in the recreational space. Now, I'll clear up a couple of things because there's a bit of a misconception. Sometimes people think that on behalf of AOPA, I'm raising issues because Ben Morgan might have a personal beef with the issue and he's really peddling it because he personally wants this outcome. But on this particular issue, I was actually approached by a whole raft of recreational aircraft owners who'd individually contacted me over a period of time, not knowing each of them had contacted me saying, Ben, I want to raise a concern with you that I'm worried about you. I bought an RAOS aircraft not long ago, and when I bought the aeroplane, I had a suspicion that the aeroplane weighed a lot more than what the aircraft flight manual said it weighed empty. And so I had my aircraft weighed, and I was shocked to learn that my aeroplane was 115 kilograms heavier at basic empty than what the book says it, right? And what the book says it was. And that's not a small margin. That's a massive margin. I had examples of 25 kilos overweight. I had examples of 8, 9, 10 kilos overweight. I had examples of 90 kilos overweight. So over a period of time, a number of these issues had come to us at AOPA. And I remember speaking to the board saying, look, I think we need to raise this issue with CASA because this is actually a serious issue. And what I explained to the board was, could you imagine you're a pilot, you buy one of these airplanes and you're pretty excited about it. You open up the aircraft flight manual and it has the weight and balance calculations. You throw your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mum and dad, your sister, brother, what doesn't matter, your friend. You put them in the aeroplane, you fill the thing up. You're in RAOs, so you're limited to this weight, this ambiguous kind of weight, arbitrary weight argument. So you load the aircraft up to its maximum performance according to the flight manual, only to discover 6 months later when the performance of the airplane was, and I had a couple of guys saying it always felt like the airplane was right on the aft limit, but it was never loaded that way. So I had it weighed and then I realized, holy shit, this thing's at the aft limit because the aircraft weighs a ton more than it's supposed to. And then when you put all my weight and fuel in it, this thing's right out. So I genuinely believe, so I took it to the board and said, I think there's a real safety case here. We need to write to CASA. And we need to say to CASA, you are the safety regulator. Forget this nonsense about self-administering crap. We're pilots, we're aircraft owners. This is about aviation industry system safety. It's about the safety of human beings. So I wrote to the board and I explained this situation. And I also explained to the CASA board that there is no requirement when an RAL's aircraft is put on the RAL's register, the damn thing gets weighed. That's one of the most fundamental basic principles of putting an aircraft on the VH register is you weigh the bloody aeroplane because over time, equipment gets put in, equipment gets put out, the center of gravity can shift. And of course, we all know the real serious safety risks of weight and balance loading. So I wrote to the board of CASA, highlighting this on behalf of our members and on behalf of the board, that we need change. We need CASA to be a safety regulator and to do the right thing and to impose requirements that simply would say, when the aircraft are put on the damn register, weigh them. And more importantly, because of the examples we'd amassed, we were calling on CASA to say, we understand it's going to cost money, but the RAL's community need to go and get these airplanes weighed and confirm that their flight manuals are accurate. Now, I put it in thinking we've done a great thing for aviation safety. I'm going to get my ass kicked by Michael Linky and Michael Monk, who are going to come down on me like a ton of bricks because they're going to, anytime I open my mouth in relation to recreational issues, I'm the bad guy. And so I'm waiting for it. And what was the next thing that happened? I actually didn't get an angry phone call as I normally would from Michael Linky or a letter from Michael Monk because, you know, I'd written to the CASA board confidentially about this issue. The next thing I received was a letter from RAL's lawyers threatening to sue me for defamation because I wrote a safety concerns notice to the board of CASA on behalf of aircraft owners and pilots saying, we need to fix this critical safety issue because we don't want people to be killed. And I've never forgotten that. I've never forgotten that it's that how in bed CASA genuinely are with what's been created in that space and how resistive CASA are in considering any logical improvement suggested by anyone other than either RALs themselves or CASA. And I think it's important for people to know some of these things that have gone on because they see the reactive side. Now, and I've heard all the scuttlebutt that gets pumped out. Everyone's always, across the recreational sector, it's always, AOPA wants to destroy us. No, we don't. We want a safe aviation ecosystem. We want pilots to be safe. We want their passengers to be safe. I just think there's this huge abrogation of responsibility by the National Safety Regulator. And there's an abrogation of responsibility by the ATSB to do their damn jobs and protect safety. And quite often say they're too ambitious on safety. We want to reel them back. But in this particular instance, there's a lot that could be done to clean up that space that ultimately would give us a much better industry because of it.
Yeah, well, 115 kilos in an aircraft of that size can kill you. There was a tragedy down in Canberra in a certified aircraft, 4 people on board within weight and balance, but took off on runway 30 on a hot day, no climb performance, couldn't outclimb the rising terrain towards Mount Ainslie, and crashed and literally burned and killed the 4 people on board. So if you're 115 kilos overweight on a high density altitude runway, I wouldn't want to be 115 kilos overweight in my Bonanza, much less.
Clinton, I have said, and I will say it out loud, if you've bought a recreational aircraft and you haven't bought it new, and it's been a long time on the RAL's guys, go out and spend the money and get it weighed. Get it weighed and confirm your AFM to be accurate. It's your lives, it's your passengers. Don't take risks with stuff like this. Just get the airplane weighed. It's a simple thing. There's plenty of places you can do this. Get it weighed and just confirm that the data is accurate, because unfortunately, under the RAL's system, and actually, to our credit, Clinton, to the credit of AOPA, CASA very quietly, without making any fanfare or announcement, imposed a requirement on RAOs that all new aircraft onto the register now have to be weighed. So we scored a major victory for the safety of pilots and for the safety of our industry, but nothing was ever said about it. CASA did it very quietly, and RAOs made sure no noise was made about it. But if you bought an RAO's aircraft, just go weigh the damn thing, confirm it. I know with my old girl, it's had so much equipment taken out of it now in this restoration, it will be reweighed, as it has to be done under law. And I want it to be reweighed because I want to know exactly what I can put in it, how much fuel I can load in it, because it is about safety. And I don't think any of us should shy away from it. Okay, we're running out of time. We've got 2 more issues we need to tap on really quickly. Clinton, you've got some good news. You put in your order for your ADSB device under the rebate. And I believe you've got it, and your rebate's been approved.
Yeah, so I got the conspicuity device and had a little trouble setting it up and getting it to work in the air. And then I, with some trepidation, went to the online application system to apply for the rebate. There were a couple of hiccups in that. Obviously, it's the usual government online system where it wasn't tested on human beings, but nonetheless, I figured out the quirks in it. On the first page, even though after you fill out all the information, you've got to do the verification step first before you submit the page, even though you've got all the information there. So that's one thing that I did a little bit of swearing at, but got around. The other thing, it asked for whole numbers of figures, and I thought, $722.15 was a whole number. No, they want whole dollars. So I had to figure that out for myself. But other than that, it all went through, and I got an email yesterday. So I've submitted it about a week and a half ago, and I got an email today. It's been approved. So I'll wait to see how long it takes for the money to appear in the account I nominated.
Well, when we went out to Wagga, we got to see some of the ADSB devices that are on offer to the industry. And one of the ones that I got to check out was the UAvionics solution for the Beach Bonanza. It's a little ADSB transponder that goes in the strobe light position on the tail of the aeroplane. The guys at Falcon Air have got that underway for me for this particular aeroplane, and so I'll be making a claim on the program myself. The program only has a short time to run unless there is going to be an announcement by the government that this will be extended. So don't wait too long, guys. If you've got the money available and you obviously have a need, get the equipment now, get that rebate, claim it, take advantage of this. This was originally when ADSB was brought onto the table for discussion, AOPA did a lot of work to lobby air services and the government to make sure that there was going to be a healthy rebate scheme. At the last minute, that was all taken off the table. When I joined AOPA, it became an issue that we started peddling and banging the hammer on hard. And thankfully, under the last government, we got a commitment out of them to get this program up. Andrew Anderson, who's former president of AOPA, who is the chair of the Industry General Aviation Advisory Network panel, he has done a huge amount of work behind the scenes with a whole range of players as well to get this for the industry. So AOPA once again leading that charge, and AOPA people really driving benefit for the aviation industry. So not only get that ADSB rebate underway, but jump online, become a member of AOPA and support the team that is supporting general aviation. Okay, Clinton, we're going to have the last topic for tonight. We're going to close out. We've done this one in record time at 1 hour, 24 minutes. And that is, we really do need to give everyone just a bit of an update on the upcoming Derek Fox, former CASA FOI tell-all interview. which is set to be quite an experience. And also Glen Buckley is going to be joining us again for an interview shortly thereafter. So maybe would you like to touch on the Glen Buckley stuff first, and then we might close off with Derek?
Yeah, I mean, Glen's not in a good way at the moment, but I've spoken to him, and he sounds like he's on the path to being in a better place. But he said what we wanted to do is get the context from Derek first on a broader context, but also the inside perspective of what was going on with Glen, and then we talked to Glen about specific questions about his perspective. So hopefully the planets will align for that soon. But there are lots of moving parts in it, as you know, with Derek.
I think it's just, just to touch on this, we mentioned this earlier on in the program, the human element. And in the case of Glen Buckley, I really would encourage everyone across the industry to, just reflect on it for a little bit tonight, that, here we have a great supporter of general aviation, someone who really tried his hardest to do something good for general aviation in business, and found himself being crushed in the process. And it does come with a massive human toll and cost. And I know Glen is not an island with respect to these types of things that have happened. There are many people across the aviation industry that have fallen afoul of untoward regulatory behaviour. And, our hearts do go out to them all. And to Glen, I know will obviously be having a chance to watch this. Glen, you've got a lot of support from right across the industry, mate. We all have a lot of respect for the fact that you're standing up for yourself, and you're standing up for what you have done in business and the way you conducted yourself. And so we're all there. We're all fighting right beside you, and we'll be very much looking forward to having you join us on the program. And I know he's contacted me this week. I haven't had a chance to reach back out to him, but we're all there, and we certainly understand and we can appreciate the situation that he's in. So I guess that's just what I wanted to say to that. Now, we got the Derek Fox interview. I was actually called by somebody today who said, Ben, when is this Derek Fox interview going to take place? This is being billed as the top interview of the year, and it really will be one of those interviews. And I made the comment, I actually think it's going to be one of the most significant interviews I've given in this format, because we've got an opportunity to speak to a former CASA FOI, someone who coming into CASA had an enormous amount of aviation experience. I'll just quickly recap it. He's a current serving officer of 100 Squadron for the RAAF, and has spent a huge amount of time with that military career. He also was flying as a commercial airline pilot for many, many years, and ended up becoming the chief pilot of Tiger Air during a very tumultuous period of the domestic carrier, and through a pretty instrumental period in its relationship with the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. He'd also been flying as a senior check and training captain for the airline, so he knows commercial flying, he knows airliners inside and out, and then went to work for CASA, believing through his experiences of being with the airline, interacting with the regulator, and being part of our general aviation community, that there was a role in trying to help CASA bridge itself with the aviation industry, and to provide an interaction that the industry could work with, trust, and so on and so forth. So he went in, he had a hellishing time, and walked away from the experience licking his wounds somewhat. And through his conversations that he's had with myself, and of course yourself, Clinton, he's had some pretty compelling discussion that has come about from that. So I'm very much looking forward to having him join us on the program. But unfortunately, Derek and his family are just navigating some real difficult family challenges at the moment, and he's really had to focus on that. And that started kind of coming about shortly after I made the announcement. Unfortunately, just as we went into Easter, their situation unfortunately unfolded a little bit. But yeah, very much looking forward to having him join us towards the end of April or very early May, in what I think will be a very, very, very compelling and interesting interview for AOPA and of course for the industry. Yeah.
Well, fingers crossed, and fingers crossed that Glen continues rebuilding his strength and his spirit, I think is the word that I'd use, because he was, he's in a tough place.
Well, as I said, he's got a lot of support across the industry. I know so many people over the years that have spoken to me about their working relationship with Glen and the respect that they have for him and what he's been doing, and the fact that he's really genuinely standing up for himself. So, we'll be there by his side, no doubt, over the next few months and into the medium to long term. It would be great. Wouldn't it be great if CASA tomorrow picked up the phone to Glen and the family and said, look, let's just right this wrong, sort this mess out, and enable you and the family to move forward? Wouldn't that be a wonderful human response from the Civil Aviation Safety Authority? I don't think they're going to do it, unfortunately. They don't seem to have the ability just to write these things themselves, but no doubt Glen and all of his supporters and the industry bodies that are behind him, we're not going to take the pressure off either. So now with that, thank you so much for joining us again, Clinton, and giving up your Tuesday evening. We always appreciate it.
Yeah, well, safe flying, everyone, and I'll look forward to the next instalment.
All right, mate, thank you so much. Well, there you have it, everybody. AOPA live for Tuesday, the 18th of April. My God, the year is just hammering away so quickly. In the comments below, let us know what you think. Should we do these future broadcasts from the hangar with the aeroplanes in the background? It certainly adds a really authentic feel to it all, and it's great also to be able to share the aeroplane sitting behind me. It's something that I've had in the family now for quite some time, and frankly, if I'd had a bit more spare time over the last 7 years, I probably could have got a bit more work done on it. But it's also been an enormous pleasure to spend our weeks and days and months advocating for the outcomes that we are achieving. And on that topic, AOPA is delivering results for general aviation. It's hard to ignore the facts. The facts are, whilst other organisations out there may be taking a swipe at us, we're fighting for you. We are out there every single day making it known the issues that are important for the future of general aviation and fighting to ensure that your voice is at the table for key reforms and key change for this industry. At times, we are on opposite sides of the table to organisations like CASA or Instructor or even political representatives for the period of time. But ultimately, we're here fighting for what's right and for what would make a huge difference for general aviation. Just think about what I call the triple pack. If we can get the independent flight instructor regulations working and set up and providing a genuine benefit, then flight instruction can return to aero clubs nationwide where currently they can't afford to operate a full 141 framework. And it's a reality. CASA have created a flight training industry regulatory package that requires a flight training school to carry an enormous overhead of staff and regulatory compliance requirements that just make flight training more expensive to a point where it's not competitive. And of course, are we surprised when we see aero clubs withdraw? Hopefully, the individual flight instructor 141 approval process can be improved and can be made incredibly efficient and affordable. We're going to be there fighting for that. That's absolutely one of our key objectives to getting this industry working again. And I'd ask you all to consider this. It wasn't RAOs that fought for this. It actually wasn't Sport Aircraft Association that fought for this. It wasn't the Regional Airline Association that fought for this. It actually wasn't anyone except AOPA. It was AOPA that just a year ago fought so hard to get Pip Spence to put this one on the GA work plan. And to her credit, she did. And to CASA's credit, in a very short space of time, they have responded to this need by delivering this initial regulatory package. It's not perfect. We will get there. The second one, which we're hoping CASA will announce in a very short space of time, is the Part 43 engineering reforms. This, again, will be an effort to transform and modernise the aircraft maintenance engineering standards in Australia. But again, I would say the following. Whilst it's going to be a step in the right direction, it's not going to be perfect from day one. It is going to have some difficulties on its introduction to the industry. But if we work at it, if we stay committed to these processes, then we are going to be able to deliver improvements in sustainability and success for general aviation into the long term. The third element, which is probably the one that's the closest to my heart and that's been the most important on my advocacy agenda in my time at AOPA, has been the pilot medical reforms. We need pilot medical reform in this country like no man's business. We need to now catch up to the United States. We need to catch up to the UK. We need to deliver self-certification medicals for RPL and for PPL pilots under the CASA system that enable the same freedoms that are granted to pilots in the UK and in the US. AOPA released a comprehensive table comparing these medical standards around the world, and it is so clear that Australia is now so far behind. We are at the back of the pack. We need to come to the front. CASA has an opportunity in its latest round of the Part 67 TWG to get this right, and I am encouraging Pip and the entire team, let's kick a home run. Let's do this. I said this to Pip probably 2 years ago. Deliver our industry the essential tools that we need to go rebuild our industry and to build success for general aviation, and that is exactly what we will do. We will build a safe, we will build a prosperous and sustainable general aviation industry that will be here for another 50 to 60 years to come. General aviation has a role in the Australian economy that is no more diminished today than it was nearly 50 years ago. I watched a fantastic video produced by the Beechcraft Corporation. In fact, I'll post it up on Facebook so everyone can see it, but it was an advertisement for buying a Beechcraft Bonanza in the 1950s, and it laid out an entire vision for airports nationwide throughout the United States, business people, families flying, closing the tyranny of distance, using aircraft as the modern car. We can still achieve this dream. General aviation is there to be taken advantage of and for the entire national economy to benefit from. That's what we're here doing Monday to Friday with AOPA, advancing your rights as an aircraft owner, advancing the industry as a success. So if you share in that vision, if you like what it is that we do here at AOPA, then I am imploring, begging you, please jump online, become a member. Grab your pilot colleagues, grab your aircraft owner colleagues, ask them to make a commitment towards the future of general aviation. You're not just putting $159 in the bank of AOPA, you're putting $159 of horsepower behind our advocacy to achieve these sensible but essential outcomes that we will all benefit from. Please become a member of the association. Support this vision. It is a vision for national success. Okay, guys, at 1 hour, 37 minutes, you've all endured enough. I'm Ben Morgan, Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you join us. I certainly look forward to seeing you all again next week.